Welcome, seekers of the paranormal. And listen in as we dive into the eerie and unexplained. So turn off the lights as we join Dustin and Luke in exploring the unknown.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Exploring the Unknown. I'm Dustin.
I'm Nuke.
We are your hosts with the most ghosts. I have the most ghosts.
You
No,
do.
I don't know. You know what I'm talking about? There ain't no ghosts here. Although I do be freaking myself out sometimes when I go outside. You know, my brain likes to be like, "Hey, your doppelganger's right behind you, and you're gonna turn a corner and you're gonna be face to face with it." So being outside at night kind of freaks me out. Oh man! Today we have an amazing episode for you guys. We have on Daniel James. He is a cryptozoologist. One of the hosts of Celestial Oddities Paranormal Guys. I had to stress to get that one out. I was gonna say paranormal guys. Pair of normal guys. A little play on words there. And he's also a filmmaker. He has a podcast mentions. If you want to support the podcast, there's some links down below in the show notes. These are affiliate links. If you go to either one of those links and make a purchase, you will be supporting the podcast. Or if you don't want to do that, you can also go to our donation page on our website, click the either PayPal or Cash App, and you can submit a small donation. Also on the website, there's a section that you can submit a form or your contact information if you encounter and would like to come on the podcast. Wow, you're having some major issues there, dude.
Yeah, I don't know why my things keep turning on and off.
That's weird. Anyways, while you're on the website, make sure to check out our events section where you will be able to see any recent events that Luke and I have coming up that we'll be at. And we have one coming up at the end of the year, September 6th and 7th in Farmington, Pennsylvania. The PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure. I am excited for that, dude.
I am too. We had fun at the last festival we were at. It's going to be even better this time because we're going to have some merch to sell and hopefully have some banners and people can recognize what we are. It was a last minute decision last time, so we weren't really prepared.
Yeah. And shout out to everybody that we met there at the PA Myths and Legends. That was really cool. We got to meet some people that we have had on the podcast in the past. Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, I had a blast. If you haven't already, go subscribe to the YouTube, like and share the videos. We could always use more subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll help us out greatly. So now back to Daniel James. Daniel James, a renowned cryptozoologist and filmmaker whose journey into the unknown is nothing short of extraordinary. With first-hand experiences that delve deep into the realm of the paranormal, Daniel has encountered phenomena that defy explanation. The pinnacle of his adventures took place at Mount Shasta, where he had an up-close and personal encounter with Bigfoot. But that's not all. Daniel has also witnessed a shape-shifting Bigfoot, adding an even more mysterious twist to his pursuits. So get ready to be captivated as Daniel shares his thrilling and spine-chilling tales from the edge of the unknown. Hello?
Hey, how are you?
Hey, how's it going, dudes?
Pretty good. How are you?
Cool, man. Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. How'd you get into paranormal investigation, Bigfoot research, stuff like that?
Yeah, is this the show right now? Is this happening, or is this like a pre-show,
Yeah.
or we're in it?
This is it right here. Yep.
This is the moment. Okay, cool. Right on. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Daniel, and I it was sort of like that same old boring story where it's like when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I started having my own personal experiences that before I went through anything of what I would call as like a spiritual awakening, I didn't understand them like everybody else. I just didn't know what these things meant or what was happening, but they were certainly paranormal, certainly esoteric, certainly extraterrestrial, certainly other dimensional. And that just really intrigued me, inspired like sort of like a fire to learn, to know more, to want to understand what's happening and what does this all mean?
Yeah.
So that's sort of
I'm
like
sorry. Give me one
early.
second. Luke, I
Sure.
can hear everything in the background.
I forgot to mute my mic.
Okay,
Yeah, I was
I'm
like,
sorry about
we have a
that.
fourth person on the show. Cool. Yeah,
All
so
right.
no,
Yeah, if you
just
could.
being introduced to the paranormal and the esoteric from first hand like personal experiences as a young kid going into my teens was sort of what opened the door for me in the sense that was like, okay, there's more. And I don't care what we're not being told. I know what I'm experiencing. So that's where it
Yeah.
started for me.
Yeah. Now, did you like talk to your parents about this stuff? Like, how did they react to this?
Yes. So I was really open and honest with my parents about sort of like esoteric paranormal interactions and things that I'd seen. And fortunately, both of my parents were pretty open-minded about,
Yeah.
the paranormal and things of that nature, even specifically my mom. But both of them were supportive in like the things that I was experiencing. And they weren't the type of people that say, oh, it's just in your head, or that's not really happening, or you only see that in movies. They were really like
Mhm.
interested in listening to me and hearing me out. And then so my mom specifically, her and I growing up in Washington State, which is a really, really hot spot for paranormal activity because it has what's called as ley lines that run through it, through the area that
Mhm.
I lived in Washington State. And ley lines are like, in a sense, like a really conductive energy source for entities that exist in other dimensions or densities or lower astral, upper astral, however your definitions are. Ley lines can be used as like an energy source for them to manifest in our version of reality. And so we had ley lines that ran through Washington State where I grew up. And so my mom and we would experience like extraterrestrial encounters, UFOs on a regular basis. I mean, if you're even from the West Coast at all, or you're familiar, then we have a lot of sightings of the Sasquatch in Washington State. So it's just a really paranormal area. So a lot of us as locals, in terms of living in Washington, the activity there of like things like cryptids and cryptozoology or UFO sightings was so common that it was almost like even our local population in smaller cities were having their own experiences, that it was almost just accepted. It wasn't like this
Mhm.
like sort of taboo esoteric thing where it's like, oh well, that stuff doesn't really exist. No, so many people had encounters and experiences in that state that it was like you felt kind of supported and you felt kind
Mhm.
of comfortable telling people, hey, I saw a UFO today, and it was like this big silver spherical ball that was just hovering right above the city. And people were like, oh yeah, I saw one like 2 days ago, but only this one was like a big fireball. So it was just common out there. I kind of grew up in an
Yeah.
environment that supported that. Lucky
Well,
in that sense.
yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. I believe that like kids are more sensitive to these kinds of things. And
Absolutely.
whenever you grow up in an environment that is like, no, no, that stuff don't exist. You shouldn't be talking about that. You suppress that and you adapt and you're just not aware of it anymore.
That's right. And I'm really glad you mentioned that. I would love to touch on that real quick if I can. I think that all of us, in a sense, are born with extrasensory abilities. Like if you think about like the clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, claircognizance, any of those type of abilities, mediumship, psychic abilities, channeling abilities. We a lot of our kids, they talk about having like imaginary friends and seeing spirit guides, and it's like really amazing stuff. Like I have a friend whose little girl tells me that she's seen elves and sort of like little troll type things outside her house all the time, and I completely believe her. She's not kidding or being cute about it. Like she tells me that she sees these things, and what my sort of theory or my perception of this phenomenon of us being kids and having like this sort of supernatural ability to perceive more of what's really around us outside of our 3D senses as we go through things like Common Core school, as we start
Mhm.
getting into religion, as we start, worrying about life and survival and thinking about going to college, thinking about getting jobs. How do we earn money? Okay, well, here are all these things about we have to learn how to like protect our health. As you get beyond the age of, let's say, like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, when you get beyond that age range, it's almost like a lot of kids, specifically who are in Common Core school, they almost have like all of their supernatural abilities and their perception abilities to see more, to see what's really all around us at all times. It almost gets like suppressed or diminished, or like a veil of illusion gets put over all of us, because now we're focused. Now that sort of like magic way that we look at reality as kids, without the filters of survival and the filters of all these paradigms that really control our perception all the time and are pulling us in all these different directions on what we need to focus on in our day-to-day life, that magic sort of goes away. And it's almost like we're given like blinders. And so you notice kids stop talking about these amazing things that they experience and they see that are very real to them around like the age of like 10, maybe 11 on the high end, and then it's gone. If you guys ever
Yeah.
noticed that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I have.
yeah. And so if
Now,
you have a little one there also, Luke, you're in a powerful position to cultivate any sort of special senses that your little one might have, many abilities. Anytime that they say that they see things that we don't see, or maybe have abilities that we don't have, you could cultivate those and encourage them and make sure that they feel comfortable in telling you this type of stuff. Because I work with sort of like coaching parents with kids who might be expressing the things that we would almost call magic, because we lose that. So I always tell parents to encourage those things that our kids tell us about, so that they feel comfortable, and it's not like a judgmental thing or like a taboo for them to tell you that, hey, I saw an elf in the garden today.
mhm,
And then I think that we could either teach our little ones, our youth, how to keep those abilities longer into our teens, or maybe not lose them at all, depending on how much it's accepted and cultivated in their behavior when they're young.
right. Now, do you think that like the children that have suppressed that ability, do you think that in their adult years that they can unsuppress that? And like, what
Yes.
does that process look like to you?
Yes, absolutely. So I always want to try to angle things, like leverage them in a positive agenda, giving us like a more empowering way of looking at things. So what I would mean by that is, like, let's say, for example, I talk to people that are in their 50s or their 60s, who are born in a time where it's like the idea of like consciousness and believing in the esoteric and the paranormal are so um, diminished in people in our older generations. Like, it's harder for them to accept that like maybe aliens exist, or that we have things like the Sasquatch that exist. I like to say that it's a process of unlearning. So
Hmm.
if we are born with innate abilities to perceive that of what is outside of our principal 3D senses, then we're going through processes through the paradigms of our society in our teens that is sort of limiting, taking that away from us or blocking us from those abilities. But I think that they're more suppressed, and maybe they're sort of like, what's the word I want to use? Um, well, suppressed works. They're more suppressed, but they're not deleted. They're not destroyed. They're not taken away from us. We just have to figure out how to unlearn the limiting beliefs that have programmed us into thinking that those things aren't real, into disbelieving in more of what's natural. Like, another analogy I like to use is like, if we don't understand nature, then expand your idea of what's natural. So I think that things like, in talking about cryptozoology and all of the creatures and the species that exist outside of our understanding of science, I think they're all very real. They're all around us at all times. Um, but that is kept from us. It's suppressed for certain reasons that we're the civilians, the mass consensus, like general civilian population, we're not supposed to know about those things. So there are systems and paradigms designed culturally to diminish that away from us. So all we have to do is unlearn the programming that has separated us from those innate abilities that I think that we all have. Maybe they're dormant or they're suppressed, they're diminished. They exist. We just have to figure out what the limiting beliefs are that we've collected over our teenage and our early 20s that have cut us off being not only accepting that these things are real and that they're all around us, but even being open to learning more about them and understanding about more of what exists in nature all around us. And so if we can unlearn the programming and find out what the limiting beliefs are that have turned our focus away from these spiritual beliefs or maybe our supernatural powers, that we all have natural gifts that are sort of like we're just, our focus is driven away from those things so that we don't exercise them as tools that we all have, then they re-unlock. We can come back into our power. We can rediscover these abilities and these senses that we have. They can be re-exposed and we can come back into them. But it's a process of digging out limiting beliefs that we collect when we're young and programming that drives our focus away from being interested in these types of topics.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that I'm older, like I'm just now starting to get into all these different beliefs that I've had rooted in my own system that I didn't even know, you know.
Sure.
There was a book that I was reading. It was called The Body Keeps Score. And it's about how the body stores trauma.
Yes.
And oh man, I knew where I was going with it, and then
sure, no, that's okay.
Completely gone.
Well, the body does store trauma. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, but my point of what I was saying was the beliefs. Sometimes as children, we look between the lines of what the adults say, and we form our own belief off of that, even if it might not be true.
That's right. Right. We turn to our, what I call authority figures. And that's a huge key right there, right? When we're young, when we're at a very young age, our immediate authority figures are what we identify as guardians. That's going to be our parents, our grandparents, older siblings, right? That's the first place. Whatever their beliefs are or limiting beliefs are going to distill into us. We're going to accept that as part of the way things are because we look to that person for survival. So anybody that we identify as a guardian or an authority figure in something, we innately trust without questioning much until we get old enough to start thinking for ourselves. But that's why programming happens really young. And then we get into patterns of limiting beliefs or even negative beliefs because from our guardians and our parents, who I don't mean any sort of particular judgment on, it's just that those are our first immediate people who are teaching us about life. But then take it into high school, take it into middle school, high school, into your teens. Now you've got teachers that you look to as an authority figure, or maybe even a guardian. Then you get out of school. Now you've got a boss or a superior in your place of employment. They're an authority figure in whatever this system is then. Then you look into like all of our religious figures. If you're somebody who practices religion, whatever the cultural beliefs and a particular religion will serve as an authority figure on your life and how to do life. Then you can look at like things like the medical industry, medical science, historians, look at history. They're all authority figures. Psychologists are authority figures, military figures. So I'm giving you sort of an analogy of how as we are younger, we have an innate sort of guidance system that influences us to just trust whoever we think is an authority figure or a guardian outside of ourselves. Doesn't mean that those people are right. It doesn't mean that what they're teaching us or what we're learning is constructive or positive or motivating. It just means that that's all we know.
Right.
So that's what I mean by like unlearning and deprogramming things that we collect as kids, as teenagers into our early 20s from whether it's religion, whether it's certain medical sciences that really don't work or are not helpful to us, whether it's certain history, that a lot of history is actually false. Unlearning a lot of false history would be hugely beneficial. And then coming into like the ideas of like just looking at like the concept alone, to accept this concept would be so powerful for people that seeing is believing. But if you flip that to believing is seeing first, that opens a door for our perception to change on a lot of things across the board in any paradigm of society that we want to change our opinion on. So, yeah.
So now, as a child experiencing these things, if you could remember, like what kind of beings was it that you had seen?
Totally. So before I went through like a spiritual awakening and I started studying and researching cryptozoology and getting into aliens, extraterrestrials, I didn't know definitions and terms for things. I didn't understand the way like the astral realms work, or that we have different consciousness levels of densities. I didn't know all this stuff. But these are frameworks where, let's say, for analogy's sake, we're in the third density or the third dimension. Then there are other realms too. And in these other realms of frequency, which are just levels of consciousness, there are whole other species or races that exist that we don't perceive with our 3D senses because they're separated in like a different frequency band. I didn't know any of this type of thing when I was a kid or a teenager. I just knew horror movies. I just knew alien movies and sci-fi like everybody else. I didn't understand like the whole science behind the fact that these things really do exist and they have their own worlds and stuff like that. So I have seen a variety of different, what I would term as extraterrestrial species. I've seen 6 or 7 different types of what we call UFOs, which are really just extraterrestrial craft that are all different shapes and sizes and colors. And I've seen all of them a variety of times. I've seen Sasquatch, what we call Bigfoot, multiple times throughout my life, all pretty much in New York, Western New York, and in Mount Shasta, California. I've had face-to-face encounters with the Sasquatch. I've seen the type of things that are like cryptids. I've seen like a goblin or a troll, like a little golem type thing. I've seen like creatures that fly with giant wings that are not birds. And then getting into more so, those are what we would call like cryptids, or maybe like subvariants of like interterrestrial beings. I've also seen stuff from like astral realms, which are a different class, but they're a different type of thing, like lower astral entities, which are usually like parasitic in nature, but they're very real. They're almost more so like animal species, but they're just creatures that exist that we don't have any sort of medical science around because they exist in a different frequency band. And when I talk about the astral entities, man, the stuff that you've seen in like horror films, I've seen like giant like 6, 7, 8 foot like hulking creatures without heads.
Oh my
I've seen,
God.
yeah, with other people to corroborate, right? So I'm not alone. So we're seeing these things together. One time I saw a guy in my house when I was home alone who he had like dark brown skin, and he had long stringy hair, and he had long fingers and long fingernails. Like, what is that? I don't know what that is, but these are like astral entities that can bleed
Yeah.
into our reality from theirs. And
Mhm.
sort of like these types of entities are usually mischievous, nefarious. They like to sort of create fear and stress and anxiety. So I've seen aliens, I've seen astral entities, I've seen cryptids, like you name it, all my life. I've been surrounded by this sort of supernatural sort of presence in a sense, because I've always just been open to accepting that they are real. And the more that you are open to accepting that, then it tends to attract more encounters. So
Yeah. Now, I'm curious. How do you become a cryptozoologist? Like, is there a certification that you have to go
no,
get? No?
no, people have just been calling me that the last few years because I'm so into it. Like,
Mhm.
we go on monster hunts and I've had encounters. So like if I'm somebody who has had face-to-face encounters with things like trolls and aliens and Sasquatch, and I can share these stories and tell people what I've encountered and the fact that they've always happened with other people. Like, I'm never alone. So I have other people to say, hey, I was there, I saw that too. So it helps sort of validate it.
Mhm.
When you just get into sharing these stories, if you're interested about it and you do deep research into the consciousness perspectives of like how densities and dimensions work, that adds like a certain understanding of how much really does exist around us in a scientific way. It's just not it's not acknowledged by our science or by our history. It does not mean that those things don't exist. And when you start to research them, you find evidence, then you go out and do your own research and you collect more evidence, and then you meet more people in the field who have had their experiences. Cryptozoology, in a sense, more so, I always get the definition a little different each time, but it's like the study and the research of animals or creatures that are unsubstantiated by science. That's sort of like a loose definition of what cryptid means.
Mhm.
So it doesn't mean that they don't exist. It just means that medical science or historical science doesn't validate it, or we don't have it in the history books. It's not talked about, right? But it doesn't mean that these
Mhm.
things aren't real. So the research of cryptozoology into cryptids are basically classed as anything that people have seen or had an experience with, or even maybe possess evidence of their existence, but it is not acknowledged by our government, by our leadership, by science. So I like to call myself, I guess, a cryptozoologist because a couple times of years, a couple times per year, I'm somebody who goes to places like Ohio. I go to West Virginia. I go to Washington State. You know, I'm going to, one thing I'd love to talk about is I'm going with 4 people to Nevada this June on, I guess, like an unofficial monster hunt, but we're going to a lot of paranormal hotspots that have a historical significance in experiences with the unexplained, with the unknown, with giants and sea creatures and Bigfoot and things that fly and all kinds of stuff. There's all these wonderful places in Nevada and West Virginia and Ohio and New York, all over the country that are hot spots for the
Mhm.
for sightings of what we call cryptids. So I guess in terms of cryptozoology, I'm somebody who, as a filmmaker, I like to produce a lot of media and content on my adventures in looking for these things. I like to go out there in the dark, in the woods for a couple nights and meditate. I like to go out there and do like contact protocols for the Sasquatch. I'm somebody who will literally drive all over the East Coast just to be somewhere where people have seen like, you know, a fucking dragon or, you know, a colony of trolls. Like I'm really into that thing. So a couple times a year, myself, my girlfriend, and some friends will usually go somewhere at least once or twice a year where there's been sightings of these things. And we don't necessarily go out there to capture them on camera. We don't necessarily expect to have an experience or encounter every time. But these things do happen, and we like to investigate that sort of shadowy area of the unknown because not only are we experiencers of it, but we're open to these uh, to the existence of them. And it's a very fascinating thing that I think can happen to you as an individual, right? Just being in the presence of something that you've only ever heard stories about or you've only seen in the movies, it does something to you. It
Mhm.
changes your mind. It changes your perception on reality. What you understand about nature expands, and that becomes more of what's natural. And then it happened things to your consciousness change where it's like you just look at life and reality different when you've seen one of these things. And it's almost like if I can even go as far as to say like it's almost like a little bit of a buzz or a high or addictive to like to have that validation that you've seen
Oh
something that
yeah.
you've only heard about in movies that are always depicted to us in a way of fiction that
Mhm.
show in TV shows and movies and all of the monster hunting shows on television network. um they're always angled in like a fictional way that really creates this veil of illusion that like although the mystery and the wonder and the lure and the intrigue is out there, you're never really going to know, and you're never really going to, the government's never going to tell you the truth, or we're never really going to know. But it's fun to wonder like, no, listen, I know and I will go out there and have my own experiences. Let me tell you this one more thing and I'll quit ranting. um One of my ex-girlfriends used to work in the television industry of the paranormal, and she was involved in a lot of the monster hunting shows and the ghost hunting shows. And so being with her for a couple years, I was brought around to conventions where paranormal conventions, monster hunting conventions, where a lot of the celebrities, like the big movie stars from all of the monster hunting shows, they would be there as guests.
Oh wow.
And so I got to meet a lot of them because I was there with her. And, you know, I was her plus one. So we were there all the time. And you just sit down and talk to these people and have pizza with them and hang out and bullshit. And the stuff that I learned from them was eye opening, that they are actually told by the network and the studios that fund the cost, the production of all of these monster hunting shows, that when they go out there looking for all these creatures, if they actually find evidence, they're not legally allowed to show any of the evidence on the network, on the television show. So they actually do have encounters. Sometimes they do run into like the dog man or, you know, a whole colony of, you know, like gnomes or something, but they'll never air that
Yeah.
because our government, our leadership and the networks, they don't want civilians knowing that those things really exist. So every time those big shows that are monster hunting find evidence, they lose it. It's gone. We never see it.
That's wild.
So what that tells you is that our leadership doesn't want us to know the truth. And as
Mhm.
somebody who likes to consider myself as a free thinker, right away I'm like, okay, well, great. That means that those do exist, And there really is evidence of it that we're never going to be given. So when you understand that concept alone, that information is suppressed by them, that validates the fact that they
yeah.
do exist right away. That tells you
Oh,
that they
yeah.
really are. Maybe medical science and history will, and our government will never tell us the truth about the existence of aliens and cryptids. But the fact that you find out from network professionals who work in the television industry who tell you that, hey, every once in a while we capture amazing stuff and they tell us to burn it. You'll never know. Not about it from our show. That's like, what the fuck is the point of the whole fucking show then if you're not allowed to air any of your evidence? They're like, well, they don't want
Right.
people knowing that they really exist. Well, fuck you.
Right. They
I
want to
believe it.
create that veil.
That they want to help separate us so
Yep.
they can drive our focus and our attention on what they know that they can use to control our attention on things. And so we're not thinking for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There you have it.
What did you say, Luke?
I said I believe it. I believe they're gonna tell us what's really out there on those TV shows.
No,
That's
could
right.
you imagine if they did though? Like everybody would lose their mind.
Hysteria. It would be
Absolutely.
like, listen, if the average American was suddenly told that aliens exist and that Bigfoot exists and that there are actually mermaids in the ocean and that dragons once flew in the sky of our planet, if we knew that, it would rewrite history. It would nullify certain religions completely. It would change medical science and the concept of evolution. A lot of major paradigms that create reality as we know it would shatter if we knew that all of these things really existed and how that would rewrite history. It would break society. It would break us.
Mm-hmm.
Things like, Christianity would just go out the window right away, gone in one night. And they can't have that. They can't have that sort of like collapse in society overnight. I think it would do a lot of really harmful things to people's psyche, to their belief systems and belief structures. And then also any sort of like shadow governments that may or may not be in control of our society, they would lose control really fast because the only control that they really have over us is the control over our perception. That's it. They can guide our beliefs in a certain direction, but that's it. Once they lose control over our belief structures and our focus on things, we're totally in control of our sovereignty in our lives, and they don't want that. So they have to control things like the existence of Bigfoot, the existence of extraterrestrials, and all that stuff. I mean, I know about military factions that really exist that do nothing but hunt and kill what we call cryptids.
That's insane.
Just kill them. So why do you think we don't see them all the time? Because they're fucking terrified of humans. Because they're killed by us all the time. There's military factions that know all about the existence of these things, and they just go out different countries. They go out in deep forests in the United States. I mean, they go into tunnel systems underground, and they kill whatever they're told would infringe on society as we know it in terms of beliefs and culture. There it is.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That is insane. You had touched on being a filmmaker. What kind of movies have you done?
Yeah, man. Thanks for asking. So I'm a full-time filmmaker. Grateful to say it. I produce independent films, and I have my whole life since I was a teenager. I'm now in my late 30s. So I'm a full-time independent filmmaker where we love to do like sci-fi, we love to do drama, a little bit of horror. But I also am a full-service video company as well. So my partner Lauren and I, we run a video service called The Moment Imaging, where we actually do marketing and video services for businesses. So that's my full-time job. That's how I support myself and pay my cost of living. But my true passion at the end of the day is to tell stories and do narratives. And so we're big into like anything sci-fi, anything aliens, anything that's like conscious, helps people think differently.
That's awesome. That's all stuff that's right up my alley. I graduated from Full Sail for music production.
Excellent.
So if you ever want to collab on something or need some music,
we can.
let me know.
We can. That's a total opportunity there. That's super cool.
No, I saw that video you posted on your YouTube about seeing Bigfoot up in New York and California. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, so I think it's so funny that I tell everybody that I grew up in Washington State, where we have some of the most Sasquatch sightings in the country. Okay? Lived there for 17 years. Never had an experience. Never. I saw other shit. I saw UFOs. I saw aliens. I saw the astral entities walking around in my house and terrorizing me. Never saw Bigfoot until it was June 2009. I drove across the country from Washington State to Western New York to live with my dad. And it was that same weekend that my ex and I, at the time, we went to a concert, which was 3.5 hours away from my dad's house in a place called Big Flats. And we were going to a rock show, a metal show. It was like Mudvayne and it was like Zakk Wylde and Suicide Silence. It's a cool, really cool metal concert. And so, but it was far away. So when we drove across the country in my little Geo Prism that I had, got across the country fine, no issues. That weekend, which was 2 days after we moved, we drive to Big Flats, have an awesome time at this metal show, have a great time of our lives. Then we leave and it's like 11:30 at night, and now we're driving home. And like I said, it's like a 3.5 hour drive back to Niagara Falls, New York, where we lived. So we're driving through the hills of Big Flats, and it's like a lot of rolling hills. There aren't like a lot of residential or cities. Anything like that would be like, maybe 30, 40 minutes in between each, populated area, right? Mostly mountain passes. So my ex and I were driving through the mountains, and my car breaks down after it just drove across the whole country. The first night, 2 nights later, it breaks down in the hills of Big Flats. So I'm in the middle of nowhere. There's no street lights. There's no where her and I broke down in our car. There was a rest stop about a mile back that we passed on the other side of the thruway. But I mean, the battery was dead, so we didn't have any power. And it's pitch black out there for the most part. So her and I break down. I call my dad. I call my family. I said, hey, I know it's like stereotypical horror film, but we're okay. My car broke down in the middle of the woods on the way home. I'm going to figure out what to do because the battery's dead. So I didn't want anybody to have to come get us that late. So I was like, we're going to maybe stick it out here overnight, and then in the morning I'll figure out a way to get home, or if I hadn't figured it out by that time, somebody would come get us. So her and I are sitting there in our car. It's dark, it's quiet. We're like, okay, what's the action plan here? Well, let's walk back to that rest stop that was about a mile back on the other side of the thruway that we just passed a ways back, and we'll ask for help. We'll see if someone can take us to the nearest town. Maybe we can get a battery or something. Somebody with some tools to help us figure it out. So that's what we decided to do. We're going to walk from our broke down car to the rest stop in Big Flats, New York. So I remembered that as my car was dying and the lights were getting dim and the power was going, there was one of those medians where you can turn around, like those gravel areas in the middle of a thruway that you can make a loop if you have to. There was one of those right up in front of us when the car broke down. So I says, instead of crossing the whole muddy area of like the middle of the thruway, let's go up to that gravel area and then we'll walk back on the side of the rest stop. She's like, okay, cool. So we get out of the car, it's pitch black, and we walk into the gravel. And the second that we stepped into the gravel, we hear this scuffle, like this big, like the gravel sort of like disturbs, like breaks, and then we hear like this thud, like this on the ground. And we stop because we can't really see much. And I look forward, and the moon happens to just be the direction that I'm looking in the sky. It's clear night, and the moon shining down on us. And I look up, and in the silhouette of the moon, I see like a massive, like 7-foot Bigfoot Sasquatch, like hairy shaped being right in front of us. And it's like, I mean, I had to look up like this, right? It's that tall. And my partner at the time, she sees it too, and she grabs my hand, and we freeze because we were like, what the, this is, like I said before, a spiritual awakening where I even accepted that these things were real or that they existed. I didn't understand things the way that I do now, so I was actually scared. So we can hear this breathing, like this, like a heavy breaths. So her and I are frozen solid. We can't move because we're so scared. And I'm holding her hand, and then all of a sudden it bolts, and it runs past us into the tree line on the side of the road where our car's broken down. And as it runs by us, you can hear the weight of its footsteps, like doof, 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 doof. And it's like bipedal, right? 2 steps, not like a bear or something with 4 legs. I mean, it's just like a person, like a massive person runs, just this dark, giant shape, like seven or more tall, into the woods. And her and I panicked. Now, we couldn't really think straight because we were so scared, because it's like in that moment, we'd only ever watched the fake TV shows that don't actually show the real monsters. But every once in a while, if you watch like the History Channel or any of those monster hunting shows, they would sometimes have like that stereotypical Sasquatch howl, like that screech that sometimes you hear recordings of. But that's all I'd ever been exposed to. Now, people had told me in Washington State that they had encounters of Sasquatch, but I never had my own until this moment. So her and I are frozen solid, and it's like you just don't want to accept that it is what you know that it is. So you can't think straight. So instead of going to the rest stop, going through the gravel and continuing to the rest stop like we should have, we panicked and ran back to the car, which was fucking stupid. So we go back to the car on the same side that it ran into the woods. Get in the car, shut the door, lock everything, and we're like, we're scared. We don't know what to do, and we're like, what was that? And she's like, I don't know. Don't say what you think it is. And I'm like, but don't you think it was what we think it was? And she's like, just don't say it. And I was like, okay. So we're sitting there for a minute, and I'm like, okay, well, we can't stay in this car. It's pitch black all night. Can't charge our cell phones. It's freezing cold. We're in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, listen, we got to make a break for the rest stop. We got to get to it. Otherwise, we're like sitting ducks here. And we're like Sasquatch bait.
How far did you say it was?
Quarter mile.
Oh, okay.
Less than a mile. It's close. You can see it from the car. Yeah. So, and that's the only light source, right? So we're like, okay, let's get out of the car, hold hands, and let's get to the rest stop where it's going to be safe. So, once again, not thinking clearly, we get out of the car, and now we're walking to the rest stop on the same side of the car that's broken down that the Sasquatch ran into the woods at. So once again, should have gone back to the gravel or just crossed in the mud and just gone straight to the damn. So now we're walking on our side of the thruway that's broken down car. And as we're walking towards it, we can see it. We can see the lights. It's getting closer. And now we hear it trailing with us in the tree line. It's just walking alongside of us 100 feet right into the tree line on the side of the road. Branches are breaking. Sticks are breaking. I mean, we're hearing like full footsteps just with us, keeping pace with us. So she's like, just keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. And she's got my hand gripped like, as hard as she can. And we're like scared. And all of a sudden, the closer that we get to the rest stop, it lets out that stereotypical screech that you've only heard on YouTube clips, the kind that you've only heard on the TV shows. The one thing that they'll give us is that howling sound. It does that in the woods, like 100 feet from me, screeches. That howl, right? You know what it is. Like, go to YouTube. It's only one thing, and it does that. And when you hear that sound for the first time in real life, not on a YouTube clip, but in real life, 100 feet from you, it was so loud. And the sound just cuts right through your body. It cuts right through your bones. In that moment, any doubt we had, it is exactly what you think it is. There's no mistaking it. It is the thing you think it is. And it lets out that howl. And then in the distance, it set off like a whole bunch of dogs. Maybe there was like a farmhouse or some house in the woods that had a couple dogs. We hear these dogs going crazy, barking in the distance. And I just fucking grab her hand, man, and we booked it. And we ran through the median, through the mud, like I didn't want to before. We ran right through the center of the median, covered in mud and water, get to the rest stop safe, and now we're there and it's over. But that was my first experience with Bigfoot, with the Sasquatch, when I saw it. I saw it in front of us in a big silhouette, big, hairy, dark shape. It followed us down the road. It screeched. And so that was my first encounter, being exposed to it. It was truly incredible. When you know without a shadow of a doubt that it is the thing that you think it is, it really changes you, man. And that was my first encounter, just my first one.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So they're out there.
So when you say you felt the vibration go through you, do you think that was the infrasound that they talk about, or do you think it's just how loud it was?
It was a combination. Like it was in a sense like sensory overload because the sound was loud. That's one part of it. But it was when I say it cut through me like a frequency, it just more was like that disbelief just ripping out of me and knowing that it was the Sasquatch and hearing the sound in real life, it did something to me. You know, like it changed me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had an experience with my mom and my daughter. When was that, Luke? I was Thanksgiving, wasn't it?
Thanksgiving Day, yeah.
Yeah. So me and my mom and my daughter were out at my grandma's on the porch, and we were. Sorry, my daughter's banging something.
That's okay.
And I remember we were doing whoops.
Yeah.
And we've never heard of any Bigfoot encounters out in this area, but we're doing these whoops, and it's dark out. And then all of a sudden, we hear this frequency, like a
Yes.
like like have you ever heard the electric wires hum?
Yes. I know what you're talking about. I've had encountered this too.
Oh, okay. So this is something that is relative to Sasquatch.
Totally. I think, yeah, we'll talk about it in a minute, but continue.
Oh no, that's pretty much the encounter. That was all we had heard, and we didn't see anything.
Yeah, it's so that's what I call a frequency dissonance, because the Sasquatch they're real like us. They're flesh and blood, 3D beings like us. They exist. They live in tunnel systems. They live in caves, but they also have this ability to do what I call slipwalking, and it's where they can sort of phase in and out of our density realm, kind of like tuning a radio station from channel AM to FM or where, different frequency bands. They are physical like us. They do exist in the 3D, but they can shift their energy into like another realm. And sometimes when a certain extraterrestrial race or Sasquatch who have these sort of interdimensional abilities phase in and out of reality, there's like a byproduct of that. And it's kind of like what I call a frequency dissonance, where you'll feel it like an electrical buzz in your body. It almost feels like a little bit of an electricity, but you'll hear that sound that you described because it's the tuning of different frequencies where your consciousness and your perception is tuning closer to their version of reality, and theirs is tuning closer to yours. And that sound that you hear, and sometimes there's a feeling associated, it's called frequency dissonance.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I wasn't sure during the time. I was like it was, the timing was weird. I thought that's odd, but we were I don't know, maybe 75 yards from some power lines. So I thought it's possible, but it's not cold enough outside for that to be happening.
Right. Yeah, that sound you've heard, I've heard it in the middle of the woods without any power lines or electricity, and it's exactly as you described it.
That's wild. Have you had any other Bigfoot encounters?
Yes. So this one's longer, and I don't know how much time we have. And I will tell you guys right now, I have a full length vlog on my YouTube channel, which is just Daniel James XIX, where I deep dive into this whole experience because it was 5 or 6 days worth of encounters every single night in Mount Shasta, California. And I have some audio recordings that I included in the vlog as well. So if anybody has more time and wants to listen to these Sasquatch stories in full detail, it's on my YouTube. But we can definitely summarize it and go into it briefly here.
That's the one I watched.
Cool. The longer one?
Yeah, it was like an hour or so.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to put that link down in the show notes so people can find it easier.
Please do. So real quick, as I mentioned, my partner Lauren and I were videographers. So sometimes we're hired to travel and shoot video for people. And we were hired in 2019 to go to Mount Shasta, California for a spiritual retreat, where her and I were the video team. We were there to film it and document everything. And Mount Shasta, California is an absolutely beautiful place with the mountains and the forests that they have. And there's a lot of stories about not just Sasquatch sightings and other types of cryptids existing in Mount Shasta, but also like entire extraterrestrial races that people believe live inside the mountains and stuff. That's a whole nother story. There's a lot about it, like Lemurians and Telosians and stuff that are said to live at Mount Shasta. So to summarize briefly, to make a long story short, we had an Airbnb and there were two of them. In the town of Mount Shasta, there's a small residential network, a small city where you can do your grocery shopping, and there's some shops for like the touristy type stuff. And then most everything is just mountains and trees and forests. It's very beautiful. So our Airbnb was 1.5 blocks away or 2 blocks away from the second Airbnb because our group was like 16 people. So we had two houses split. One of them was deep into the residential district, and ours was at the end of a residential that was tucked away down a side road into the woods, into the mountains. So we were surrounded by trees. We were like tucked away. And yeah, so the other house, they were more residential and we were more private. In our house, we had myself and Lauren on the second floor. We had 3 guys on the other side of the house and then 2 girls downstairs. So we had a pretty full house in this giant Airbnb. And we're doing the spiritual retreat. We're having a blast. And then like the 4th or 5th, maybe the 4th night into the trip, I was responsible for being the driver of the van. So whenever we had to drive multiple people, there were 2 vans. I drove one of the vans for everybody that lived in my Airbnb, and then there was other people that drove the other van for the other house. So when we, at the end of each night, we all met up at the residential house, and then I had to drive myself or anybody who was left back to my house in the van down this road. And so one night I got back after dropping people off from to the other house. I was alone, and I sat on the porch, and I was sitting out looking at the sky. It was beautiful there in Mount Shasta. There isn't a lot of light contamination, so you can see everything. And I saw what I could only assume was a UFO, because I had been seeing them my whole life in Washington State, and I saw something dart through the sky going like this, and I was like, that's an alien. Awesome. And I'm sitting there enjoying it. And there was an empty, vacant timeshare next door to us. Nobody was living there the 2 weeks we were there. And they had a big metal fence in front of their property that was right next to ours. All of a sudden, mind you, it's like 11:30, super late. Nobody's outside. I hear this slamming sound on the metal fence in front of the property next to me. It sounded like a rock or a stick just full send into this metal fence gate. And I was like, I looked over, and that was right after I saw the UFO, and I was like, weird. I know that there's nobody awake. I know that everyone, if they are awake, they're inside in bed, and no one's living next door. All the lights were out. There's no one there, no cars, nothing. I was like, that's weird. So I just go about my business, and I'm enjoying the sky again. And then I hear the slam again on this fence. And it was kind of like too dark for me to see from the porch what's going on over there. I could just hear it. And I says, okay, I got 2 options. I can get up, walk over there and find out what's making that noise, because it's 11:30 at night and there's nobody over there. Or I can go inside where it's safe. I have a long day tomorrow, go to bed and move on with my life. So I says, I'm not going to fuck with whatever that is, and I'm just going to go inside. So I go inside and go to bed. And the next night, we had everybody come back to the house again, and we all go to sleep. And you have to understand that I'm doing like 16-hour days in the heat. We're hiking. We're going to lakes. I've got a camera in my hands, and I'm just so exhausted at the end of each day that by the time my head hits the pillow, man, I'm out. You can't get me up until the next morning when we got to get up 8 a.m. and start shooting. So I'm so tired, I can't think straight. So I did that after that night with the whole fence thing. I go to sleep, and I wake up like half disoriented, super tired. Like I'm like drooling and stuff. Like I'm out of it. And Lauren's shaking me awake. She's shaking me awake, saying, Daniel, get up, get up. And I hear what sounds like as somebody throwing rocks and sticks at the house, or banging on banging on the walls of the house, which is a 2-story house. And I'm so tired that I cannot bring myself to wake up I was like, Lauren, it's probably one of the guests. There's 5 people downstairs. Someone might be out on the back porch. We had a huge back porch where we all did like yoga and Tai Chi in the morning and stuff. I was like, someone's probably like cleaning or something. I don't know if that's why I said that, because nobody cleans at 3 in the morning. But I was like, someone's probably cleaning. I don't know. Just go to sleep. And she was fully awake and couldn't pull me out of it. So I go back to sleep. And I wake up in the morning, and everybody else who was staying in the house, they call a fucking meeting first thing in the morning. They're like, we need to talk. Want everybody to come from the second house here and just talk about it. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? Like the 3 guys on the other side and 2 women downstairs, they call a meeting in the morning. And they said that last night our house was attacked and that the house was surrounded on every point by something or somebody outside who was banging on the walls and throwing sticks at the house, and that they heard talking. They heard voices, like speaking. And on the other side was the garage door where all the guys were staying on the second floor. They said that it sounded like something was just hitting the garage door as hard as it could over and over and over, and that they heard voices, like a language. So, with that being said, we went to the grocery store and we were talking to the local people at the grocery market where we were getting our food. And we were telling people that some weird stuff has been happening around our Airbnb. And they said, oh, well, it was probably just the Bigfoots, the Sasquatch. And I said, why do you say it so nonchalantly like that? Why are you so casual about what you just said? Mm-hmm. And they're like, no, it's a thing. We have a community of Sasquatch that live here in Mount Shasta. And it is such a common knowledge thing there. Excuse me. That they have what's called as like a annual Bigfoot Day in Mount Shasta, California, where they actually have a day there where they acknowledge the existence of those beings as community members, because everybody just knows they live there. Everybody just knows they exist. It's not a secret. So many people have had face-to-face encounters that it's acknowledged. Not, of course, nationally, but the community of Mount Shasta, the locals who live there, are like, oh yeah, the Sasquatch. Yeah, they're all over the place. Like fucking just animals that you would run into when you're out, checking the mail. No, they're that common. And I was like, so then that means that everything that we experienced at the house last night was them. They're like, most likely, yeah, some of them are aggressive. Some of them are even violent. Some of them are passive and don't interact. But yeah, they're all over the place. It's pretty common. So the last thing I'm going to say until I refer everybody back to the YouTube video, which is a bit longer, is this. I am Blackfoot Native American, and there was a guest there who was like an Alaskan Native tribe. So we're both Native, and he used to tell me that the culture that he's from in Alaska, they also acknowledge the Sasquatch as just a fully existing, very real creature, a species, and that the ones that they would interact with, they did this thing. They had this thing they did, which was a popping sound the Sasquatch would do. And I'll show it to you on camera. So if you take your hand and you cup it like this, like an oyster or a diamond, just like that. Right? Now, if you look at the other side where your thumb is, okay?
Yeah.
If you cup your hands together and you clap them together, I know it's awkward, but if you clap your hands together into your mouth, I know this is weird. If you clap your hands into your mouth, it creates this air burst in your mouth, and then it creates this really loud popping sound. So here's the weird thing I'm going to tell you. Alexi told me that the Sasquatch would do that with their mouths. They cup their hands together and they would make this popping sound, super loud. Well, when I was a kid, I started doing this too. In middle school, I would just do this, and I don't know where I came up with it, or maybe I downloaded it into my consciousness, but I would do the same popping sound, and I did it like in class at school and stuff to be disruptive, because it's so loud that it like everybody hears it. It's super loud. So I'd been doing it for fun as a kid, and Alexi told me that the Sasquatch in Alaska do that as like a call, as like a communication. So he and I, as being the only two natives there, we said, you know what? I think it's about the sixth night. We were there by now. It's like maybe sixth night. Said, you know what? What if when everybody goes to bed, what if we go outside in the woods, down the road in the tree line, and maybe we stand there and do like some call outs or maybe do some light meditation and see if maybe they're out there and maybe they're willing to make contact with us. And I said, yeah, because I do that popping thing that you said that the Sasquatch tribe would do to your natives in Alaska. I do that. So maybe we go out in the woods and I'll do the popping thing with my mouth and see if they'll call back or they'll make contact. Or maybe they're not even there and we drop the whole thing up. We'll say fuck it. So Alexi and I, we go out down the road away from the house, leave our cell phones at home, and just see what happens. So I'll refer you guys to the YouTube video, but Alexi and I spent 5 nights having open communication with the Sasquatch right there outside of our property for 5 nights in a row. Where they came out, they came to the tree line, and we had all kinds of stuff happened.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I found that one you said it was interesting when you saw it walking down the road.
Yeah, at the very end of the night in the YouTube video, you'll see I had a car full of people. There were 6 people. After Alexi and I spent 5 nights doing what I call as a contact protocol, where they were coming to the tree line, we were communicating with knocking patterns, they were throwing stuff at us. Alexi saw, we heard them and saw them all around us for 5 nights in a row. At the end of the night, we had been telling everybody about our encounters in the evening that Alexi and I were having privately, to the point that we would go and we would do what's called as a game night at the other house that was in the residential network district, because they had pinball machines and pool and foosball and all the games you could play there. So we'd all spend like a couple hours gaming, and then whoever was still awake, we would drive back in my van to our Airbnb, which was in the woods. And I had a car full of 6 people. I was driving, Lauren was in the passenger seat, and I had 4 more people behind me. And we were all just talking about how this was the second to the last night being there. And the last night for most people, because most people were going home the next day. They're like, yeah, it was an amazing trip. We had such a great experience doing all of like the spiritual practices and the classroom stuff that we learned, going out on the hikes and going into the mountains. But interacting with the Sasquatch for me was like the pinnacle. That was like the most greatest experience of my life, was being able to speak with them and communicate in a way that was like so real that almost I felt like we became friends over these 5 days. And right in the middle of the road, as I was saying that, in the headlights of the van, we saw a full Sasquatch right in front of the van. And I stopped my car because it was just blocking the whole fucking road. I had to stop my car, and everybody in the car just leaned in and looked and saw it right there in the road. Like at the end of our trip, we saw a full Sasquatch in the middle of the street. And then there's a surprise there. Luke, don't ruin it for him. There's a surprise there in the YouTube video where the next thing happened was even more amazing to end the night. And so my first encounter was in Big Flats, New York in 2009, when stereotypically, like a horror film, my car broke down in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, and I ran into a Bigfoot. And then we had 5 nights of open contact in Mount Shasta, California, where we were face to face with them. So
now I have one more question before we get off here. I have a whole bunch of stuff written down that I looked at. How do you feel about dogmen? Do you think it's a different species of Bigfoot, or do you think it's a whole different thing itself?
Yes, they're their own thing. They really do exist. They're real creatures. They're real entities like the Sasquatch. They're different species. Frater, Garrett, my partner Frater from Celestial Oddities, he would argue that the dogmen are like shapeshifters. He would say that they are like more so like a spiritual sort of type of thing, where it's like a human can maybe do, say for example, can do like ceremonial magic or do some sort of exercise or protocol that can call in like a spirit that would shapeshift them into what they would call the dogmen. So he's told the story of like that sort of type of shamanistic transformation that can happen. But that's one way of looking at it, and that very well might be the case. But here's the thing. I work with extraterrestrials, and that's like a conversation for a whole different show. because it's a whole thing. But I work with ETs in my own personal way. And when you work with extraterrestrials for a very long time, you start to realize and discover that humans are also a type of extraterrestrial, that humans aren't necessarily just like our own little isolated special race, but rather the human archetype as what we are exists on hundreds of thousands of other planets. We're just one version on Earth. And the only reason why the concept of extraterrestrials and alien life is kept from us and suppressed from us is because we have like this little bubble, this little matrix, if you will. And there are factions, shadow governments in a sense, that like to try to pretend that they're in control of Earth. So their biggest trick, their biggest game is to isolate humans from knowing about life on other planets, and that not only do aliens exist, yes, very much so, but that we too are technically extraterrestrial. And if we knew that, there goes religion, there goes science, there goes history. Once again, it destroys all of that, and then they lose control. That's another reason why they kill all the cryptids. So what I'm getting at with the dogmen, Luke, is that if you guys have ever heard of the concept of like a star seed or an earth seed, basically in a sense is like, so if your consciousness, you might be human, having a human experience in the 3D, but your consciousness, your higher self, might come from somewhere else. You may come from another planet, another star system. And also we have what's called as earth seeds, which are people who are having a human experience on the surface of Earth, but we usually have maybe a long history of incarnations from intraterrestrial races that predate humanity on Earth or still exist now in underground in like cities and breakaway civilizations and all kinds of weird shit. So what I'm getting at with the dogmen is that I am a starseed from the Sirius constellation, and my extraterrestrial race is like a canine hybrid. So anything that you have in our lore about lycanthropes, werewolves, wolf dogmen, I believe that just that's derivative from the fact that we have extraterrestrial races that are human canine hybrids.
That's interesting.
And so we do have canine, like what we would call werewolves or lycanthropes. We have those species that exist on Earth, very small population. Because like I said, if our government found out where any of them lived or where they existed, they'd be hunted and killed. I don't think that they're shapeshifters the way that we have in fiction, in TV shows and movies. Instead, I think that they're just like canine human hybrids that exist that way, because I know of extraterrestrial races that just are that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now I heard a lot of things about like dogman being more of like I wouldn't say demonic type thing, but more like a evil, like more mean type creature. Do you think that's true, or is that just like folklore?
I think that's like a fear-based campaign. They would probably try to drive people away from ever wanting to seek them out and ever wanting to look for them and ever wanting to investigate them and ever wanting to have an experience. Right. Because the people that I've met in person in cryptozoology, in this field, in this community, who have met a dogman, excuse me, they've never been attacked by them. Not the people that I've met. Never been hurt by them. Whereas, believe it or not, I've heard Sasquatch being very violent, unfortunately. So.
Yeah. You might have seen me make a face a minute ago because something clicked for me whenever you had mentioned Starseed.
Yes.
Luke, I had talked to you about this the other day, and I experienced these moments where it's almost like my consciousness slips from this reality, and I feel like this is not my home. This is unfamiliar to me.
That's right. That's absolutely. And that would be a characteristic of you tapping into that aspect of yourself that probably exists on another planet in another star system. And you're just having a temporary human incarnation. But you probably have incarnations in like soul family and what I call star family somewhere else. And so you might have little moments where you feel like a calling for home, or you feel like you belong somewhere else, or you don't really feel like you associate or identify with Earth. This is usually like a homesickness from you, sort of on a DNA level, on a subconscious level, you remembering that you have life somewhere else, that you might be happier or maybe more representative of who you really identify as.
Yeah. I would like to look more into that. I think I'm going to do that.
Yeah, man, right on. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you
thank you so
want
much
to add
for
me on
coming
social
man.
media too, we can talk about it. I'm always happy to help people, guide them back home. It's what I do in my work. So
Yeah, for sure. I'll reach out for sure. I love talking about this stuff. This was a great conversation. I enjoyed this.
right on, man. Well, thank you both for having me very much. This was great. Thanks for letting me be myself and say weird shit. And
Hey, we're for it, man.
yeah.
But hey, you have a great day.
Right on, guys. Thank you very much.
All right.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Exploring the Unknown. We really enjoyed talking to Daniel with his encounters with the paranormal, Bigfoot. And I think it was interesting how he talked about the shape-shifting Bigfoot.
Yeah, that's wild. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, neither have I. Let's talk about some podcast mentions. Go check out our website, exploringtheunknown.com. exploringtheunknownpod.com.
There we go.
While you're on the website, you can go to the contact section and you can tell us your encounters and send an email to us, and we'll like to have you on a future episode. A good way to help support the podcast is the links down in the bio below. We got two. One with GhostStop and Amazon. If you click on the links and you purchase anything through those links, it will help out the show. And if you don't want to do that, go to the Cash App and PayPal and send us a donation. Sorry.
That's on our website, right?
Yes, that's also on the website. And type in for the description below a would you rather question, and we would like to explore that on a future episode.
Yeah.
And also, our website has a blog, which it gets updated every week, so go check that out. That's
updated the best it can be.
Dives farther into the episode. And PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure in Farmington, PA, September 6th and 7th. We'll be there set up with some merch and booking and scheduling podcasts for the future. And if you would like to do a podcast right then and there, we'll do a podcast there too.
That'd be cool. We didn't get to do that at the PA Myths and Legends.
Yeah, I don't think people really realized we were there as like a vendor, because we didn't have any banners or anything like that.
Yeah. That's okay though. It was a good time. It was a good time.
It was a good time.
Okay, so I thought it was interesting that last time we did like a thought-provoking question. It wasn't so much a would you rather. Remember we did the what job do you think would be good for for giants? Okay, so here's one. Are you ready?
Yep.
If Bigfoot truly exists and possesses the ability, I'm not saying that he doesn't. But he possesses the ability to shapeshift, as some encounters suggest, what implications does this have for our understanding of the natural world and the boundaries of reality as we know it? That's a deep-ass question.
It destroys all realities. Because if something can shapeshift like that, then it changes your whole reality. I mean, skinwalkers are known to shapeshift. So, I mean, people are already there about shapeshift. So I said, like, for the whole Bigfoot community is gonna be, like, mind blown.
I think a lot of them would be. But I mean, people have already. I mean, even Daniel's encountered this, you know. So I mean, again, for me, you know me, I'm a skeptical believer. So I believe that it's possible, but I have to witness it for myself to be like, yeah, for sure, it's out there. I think even just witnessing Bigfoot or paranormal activity would be reality altering for me, you know, because we've spent our entire lives up to this point believing that those aren't real, or that doesn't exist, or those are fairy tales, those are myths. Like, I don't know what I would do if something was factual. I mean, I'm not saying that things aren't factual, but for me, you know, being the person that hasn't experienced anything firsthand.
Yeah, no, I think it changes the whole, like, is it a, like, spirit, or is it, like, a flesh and blood, like, creature? Yeah. Like, people think it's just undiscovered primate. Now, if it can shapeshift and stuff like that, I think that changes the whole reality of it.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know. I think I would be interested to hear what our viewers have to say. If you could comment down below, or if you're watching this on YouTube, or I even think there's like a way to do it now on Spotify because I turned on the fan mail thing. So comment down below and let us know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, we'd like to hear your opinions on stuff like this. And if you're listening to our Spotify, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you can get podcasts, if you're able to comment down below, send some would you rather questions out there. That even gets for people on YouTube. Maybe send a would you rather question.
Yeah. Or any thought-provoking question for that matter, you know?
Mm-hmm.
These are fun.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think I got it all out.
I think so. We'll see you on next week's episode of Responding Right Now.
See you next week, guys.